As we get closer to Jesus' return, all the signs he gave us as a sign of his coming and the end of the age will become more frequent and more intense. All of these signs are manifesting around the world in our time.
To the breaking news overseas, what's being called the deadliest attack on Israeli citizens since October 7th. At least 11 children and teenagers killed after a rocket strike on a soccer field in Israeli-controlled Golan Heights. Israel blaming the militant group Hezbollah, vowing retaliation.
5 of those victims, all teenagers inside that hospital behind me with serious injuries in what's been the deadliest day here in Israel since the October 7th attacks. This video is the moment the IDF says an Iranian-made Hezbollah rocket landing near a soccer field in a Druze community in the Golan Heights, killing at least 12 people there, with most being children, injuring dozens more. Hezbollah, however, denying responsibility for the attack. It immediately spiked tensions at the northern border with Lebanon, where the IDF and Hezbollah have been trading fire daily. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu currently flying back to Israel after a trip to the U.S., This as fighting in Gaza, of course, continues.
Live from that Israeli town hit by the attack. Trey, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, hey guys, good morning. Right now we are in the Druze community of Majd al-Shams in the Golan Heights at the site of that rocket attack that took the lives of 12 young people just yesterday. I want to show you the scene here, a scene of pure devastation. We arrived this morning as funerals were taking place, a small community mourning the loss of these young lives. There were scooters here and bicycles. Kids were playing soccer when a Hezbollah rocket slammed into this field. You can see the impact site right here. To describe what took place here is to describe a massacre. We spoke with a doctor during the funeral who was one of the first responders to this attack yesterday, and he said he desperately tried to save a 10-year-old boy who was covered in shrapnel wounds, and he was unsuccessful. We spoke with a father whose young daughter was killed in the explosion, this rocket attack launched by Hezbollah yesterday. And speaking with this father, I asked him how he found out that she was killed. And he said he tried to call her again and again, and the phone was busy. And he arrived here at this field, and his 10-year-old was lying dead here among so many other children. It gives you a sense of just how violent and catastrophic these events are. And as we speak, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is preparing to convene the Israeli cabinet. We expect a major Israeli response to the Iran-backed group Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. Officials speaking with Fox News overnight say they are preparing for what could be days and days of cross-border exchanges. This is very much a turning point in the ongoing conflict that started between Israel and Hezbollah on October 8th, just one day after the October 7th massacre.
You talk about how this could spark a wider war. That is the major concern. And, you know, we say that Israel is fighting a one-front war right now. That's not really true. Hezbollah in the northern border has always been an issue, but there is concern that things could escalate. How much concern is there in Israel, and what does that mean for us here in the United States?
There is major concern about the possibility of a broader war between Israel and Hezbollah. Already, over the past several months, Hezbollah has fired thousands of rockets into northern Israel, but they've stopped short of targeting major cities like Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. If the Israelis go on the offensive tonight and strike targets around Beirut or other Hezbollah strongholds, it could be another step up on the escalation ladder, but they are really left with what officials here on the ground tell us is no other choice but to respond following the tragic attack that took the lives of 12 young people.
This headline comes from NowTheEndBegins.com on July 24th, and this end time headline reads, in Washington today, the pro-Palestinian members of our own U.S. Congress and Senate booed and boycotted speech by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. So, last week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressed Congress in the United States of America in Washington, and he was met with cheers from Republicans while being disrespected by Democrats. Now, the woman you see holding the sign, that is Rashida Tlaib. She's a political representative for the 12th District in Michigan. The person who was sitting beside her saw the signs and left, and then another Democrat come and sit beside her, and they whispered the entire time Netanyahu was talking. And a lot of the politicians just didn't go to this event, which was rare. The highest profile Democratic absences was Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. As the acting vice president, Kamala Harris should be seated right behind Benjamin Netanyahu. A lot of people look at that as total disrespect. Now listen to this part from the article. Check this out, guys. Highlighting the sensitivity of Netanyahu's address, House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican, Louisiana, sent a letter to lawmakers warning there will be a zero-tolerance policy for any disturbances during the speech. If any of their guests interrupt the proceedings, the letter says they will be removed from the House chamber and subject to be detained. Family, I don't know if you saw Netanyahu's address. If you haven't, I want to recommend you go check it out, guys. He said some very interesting things. Now, let's jump to our next headline. And our fifth headline, it also comes from NowTheEndBegins.com on July 25th. And this end time headline reads, Democrat activist right, HAMAS is coming on the Christopher Columbus Memorial Fountain at Union Station. Tear down and BURN American flags. Now family, this happened while Netanyahu was addressing the United States in the Senate. Look at this right here. And family, remember, what you're seeing happen right here is happening in the capital of the United States of America. They took down the American flag, and you can see on your screen right there what they did to it, while they were waving around Palestinian flags. Family, what has happened to America? What has America become? Now guys, this happened as Netanyahu was making his speech. Wow. But look what they did to the Liberty Bell right there and that other memorial. Guys, this is just wrong. Family, you can see the graffiti all over it. And if you look to the left right there, do you see what it says? HAMAS is coming. Well, guess what? They may be, but guess who else is coming? Jesus. Family, the situation in Israel is truly dividing America. And I feel like there's a prophetic storm brewing.
In Beirut, Lebanon, explosions as the Israeli Defense Forces retaliate against that deadly strike of the other day in the Golan Heights. Our Trey Yingst is live for us in Jerusalem. He's got the latest. Who was targeted here, Trey?
Right now, we're gathering information following a massive explosion in southern Beirut. We understand, according to the Israeli military, this was an airstrike targeting a Hezbollah commander that the Israelis say is responsible for the deaths of those 12 children and teens in Majd al-Shams in the northern part of the Golan Heights on Saturday. Remember, this is how all of it began over the weekend. That Iran-made rocket slamming into a soccer field and killing 12 young souls. The Israelis promising that they would respond, and it appears this is the response. Currently, there are no fresh instructions for Israeli civilians amid a possible retaliation by Hezbollah following this strike in the suburbs of Beirut. But we should note we are getting initial statements from senior Israeli military leadership, including Israel's defense minister Yoav Gallant, who just moments ago tweeted out, quote, Hezbollah crossed the red line. Now, I've been speaking with Israeli officials throughout the past 2 days, trying to get an understanding of the thought process about how the Israelis would plan to respond to that rocket attack on Saturday that killed those 12 people. The defense minister is describing a red line that was crossed. Earlier today, Hezbollah was continuing rocket and drone attacks into northern Israel. They actually killed one civilian, and it really illustrates the picture of how violent this group is and how often they've been attacking northern Israel since October 8th, firing thousands of rockets into the northern part of this country. But again, what we can report at this hour, there has been an Israeli airstrike in the suburbs of Beirut, Lebanon, targeting a senior Hezbollah commander that the Israelis say is responsible for that rocket attack that killed 12 young souls in the Druze village of Majd al-Shams on Saturday.
Crossing the wires right now, Trey, is that the U.S. is to pursue diplomacy to avoid escalation between Israel and Hezbollah. The State Department was just giving a briefing moments ago, said the U.S. will continue pursuing diplomacy to avert escalation in this conflict. Here's the direct quote from the State Department spokesperson. We're continuing to work toward a diplomatic resolution that would allow Israeli and Lebanese civilians to return to their homes and live in peace and security. We certainly want to avoid any kind of escalation. We're continuing to work toward a diplomatic resolution that would allow Israeli and Lebanese civilians to return to their homes and live in peace and security.
1 Thessalonians 5:3. While people are saying there is peace and security, Then sudden destruction will come upon them as labor pains come upon a pregnant woman, and they will not escape.
Over the past nearly 10 months, Hezbollah has been directly involved in this fight, launching attacks toward Israeli population centers. And they've even expanded those attacks all along the border between Israel and Lebanon. The Israelis have warned time and time again, if these attacks lead to the deaths of civilians, they will respond accordingly. We're currently in uncharted territory because Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of the Iran-backed group Hezbollah, in the past has threatened to target Tel Aviv, the city that we're currently in, if the Israelis target Beirut.
As a sign of his coming and the end of the age, Jesus declares, "And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom." The prophets of the Old Testament prophesied of these future military conflicts in Isaiah 17:1, in which Damascus, Syria will be destroyed in a single night. Jeremiah 49, the prophecy of Elam, which could infer an Israeli attack upon Iran's nuclear program. Psalm 83, in which the Muslim nations that border Israel will mount an attack on Israel in order to cut them off from being a nation. Ezekiel 38 and 39, known as the War of Gog and Magog. In this prophecy, a coalition of nations led by Russia, Iran, and Turkey will attack Israel in the last days in order to take Israel's wealth. In the last days, the prophet Zechariah tells us Israel will be the focal point of world conflict, and he gives a dire warning to the nations who would dare come against Jerusalem. Zechariah 12:2 and 3. Behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup of drunkenness to all the surrounding peoples, when they lay siege against Judah and Jerusalem. And it shall happen in that day, that I will make Jerusalem a very heavy stone for all peoples. All who would heave it away will surely be cut in pieces, though all nations of the earth are gathered against it. This prophecy is unfolding right before our very eyes.
The top leader of Hamas was assassinated in Iran, just hours after an Israeli strike killed a high-ranking leader of Hezbollah in Beirut.
Iran is blaming Israel for the assassination and is threatening a harsh response. Chris Mitchell reports from Jerusalem.
Iran media announced Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh was assassinated in Tehran after attending the inauguration of Iran's new president. Reports indicate he was killed in an airstrike at the location where he was staying. Israel has not commented on the reports, but Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu declared after the October 7th attack that the leaders of Hamas were dead men walking. The attack carried out inside Iran could ramp up the conflict in the Middle East. Iran's Supreme Leader Khamenei threatened, "It is our duty to take revenge and severely punish the Zionist entity for the assassination in Iran, because the assassination was carried out on our soil." It's the second major blow against Israel's Iranian-backed enemies on the same day. Earlier, the IDF confirmed it eliminated Fuad Shukr, one of Hezbollah's top leaders in Beirut.
Fuad Shukr was the commander responsible for the Majd al-Shams massacre, in which 12 children were murdered after Hezbollah fired an Iranian Falak 1 rocket directly at a soccer field in northern Israel on Saturday evening. He was a senior terrorist who has the blood of the Israelis and many others on his hands.
Shukr also participated in the 1983 Beirut bombing that killed 241 U.S. Marines.
My assessment is that Hezbollah will respond to this, and then the IDF already has other targets ready.
Jonathan Conricus from the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies tells CBN News Hezbollah's next step is critical.
Where I think that we should be looking forward now is to see what type of response will Hezbollah provide, where will they fire, which type of weapons will they use, and then of course the second, third, and fourth, and fifth layer of responses that the IDF has ready to Hezbollah's responses.
The strike came after Hezbollah killed 12 children in a Druze village on the Lebanese border. Conricus says it's important to remember Iran is the power behind the terror group.
As long as Israel doesn't present a strategy and starts to demand a price of the Iranian regime for killing Jews in the Middle East, in Israel, then I don't think that the situation will change, because everything that we see happening since October 7 and many years before that, but greatly so after October the 7th, all of that is related to Iran.
Conrica says it's hard to predict whether this may lead to full-scale war.
Shocking comments made by Turkish President Erdogan, who on Sunday threatened to invade Israel, further escalating tensions between the two countries. His comments were widely condemned as calls are being issued to expel Turkey from NATO. The president of Turkey, Tayyip Erdogan, issued an open threat on Sunday that his country could invade Israel to support the Palestinians.
We need to be very strong so that Israel cannot do these ridiculous things to Palestine. Just as we entered Karabakh, just as we entered Libya, we can do something similar to them. There is no reason for us not to. We only have to be strong so that we can take these steps.
He made these remarks while speaking to members of his AK party at a Black Sea province in northeastern Turkey. Erdogan has been a fierce critic of Israel and since October 7th has become a staunch supporter of Hamas, even hosting its leadership in Istanbul, and cutting all ties, including trade ties between Israel and Turkey. And mere hours after his threat to invade Israel, Turkey's foreign ministry compared Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to Nazi leader Adolf Hitler and threatened he would meet his end. Israeli and foreign leaders responded harshly to Erdogan's threats, even calling for Turkey to be ousted from NATO. Israeli Foreign Minister Israel Katz condemned Erdogan in a post on X, comparing him to Saddam Hussein, saying he is following in his same path and threatens to attack Israel. He warned Erdogan needs to remember what happened there and how it ended. Meanwhile, opposition leader Yair Lapid called on NATO members to condemn the outrageous threats and expel Turkey from the organization. And Dutch politician Geert Wilders called Erdogan an Islamofascist, adding that he is totally nuts. He also joined calls to kick Turkey out of NATO.
The prophet Zechariah tells us how the Lord will destroy all the nations that come against Jerusalem, as we read in Zechariah 14:12. And this shall be the plague with which the Lord will strike all the people who fought against Jerusalem. Just as Jeremiah the prophet proclaimed, the judgment was coming upon Jerusalem, the watchman of our time, our warning of God's soon coming judgment on a wicked and unrepentant world. Are you listening? It seems as though we are on the verge of World War III. Jesus told us in the last days there would be war between the nations. Are we seeing the stage setting taking place to fulfill this prophecy? If so, then we're close to the time Jesus refers to as the worst time in the history of the world, as we read in Matthew 24:21. For then there will be great tribulation, such as has not been since the beginning of the world until this time, no, nor ever shall be. If we are that close to the tribulation, then the world is about to see war the likes of this planet has never seen before. The book of Revelation tells us when Jesus breaks the first seal, the Antichrist will be unleashed.